The gaming industry just did something it's never done before. Told the truth about who's actually destroying it. Developers are publicly blaming investors for ruining games, and that's not supposed to happen. The money men write the checks, everyone stays quiet, studios get bought and destroyed in private. But something shifted. This week alone, 3 studios got massively screwed over in ways that would have been buried a few years ago. The Game Developer Collective just surveyed the industry, and 64% of the developers surveyed are directly blaming unreasonable investor expectations for the industry's problems. When 2/3 of the people actually making games point at the same problem, that's not opinion, it's evidence. And I've got even more receipts, and some of them are so cruel they'll make you genuinely angry. Let me show you. So the Game Developer Collective released this survey yesterday. 64% blame investor expectations and 60% cite straight up mismanagement. And we've all been saying this for years, but now they're finally admitting it publicly. The machine is turning on itself. The people actually making games are pointing at investors and saying, these are the ones destroying everything. Only 43% blame development costs being too high, because the problem isn't that games cost too much to make, it's that investors don't understand what they're buying. Just look at what's happened in the last few days. Krafton bought Unknown Worlds with a $250 million earnout bonus tied to Subnautica 2 hitting sales targets by the end of 2025. Then they delayed the game to 2026. And think about that, right? They deliberately moved the release date past the bonus deadline, ensuring the studio would miss out targets and forfeit their payout. Then they fired the creative team, claiming they'd abandoned their responsibilities and the game had insufficient content. But the founders are saying that the game was ready for early access and the delay was purely financial. But don't worry, Krafton's being generous. They're still honouring 10% of that bonus for 40 employees. The $250 million becomes 25 million. What saints? And it's now a public legal battle, with Krafton claiming profound betrayal when developers pushed back. Then Microsoft walked into ZeniMax and told 200 developers their unannounced MMO was indefinitely shelved. They just binned years of work. The devs issued a statement saying how their lives were upended without prior notice. And meanwhile, Testronic is shutting down Secret 6 Madrid, who worked on The Last of Us Part 2, Lords of the Fallen, after systematically starving them of contracts for 2 years, breaking multiple promises. Workers are saying that the plan was always to drain the studio of its content and offshore the work to their other office in Manila, where wages are much lower. In their own words, they tried to choke us from the start. The sad part is, none of this is new. It's been happening for years. If you want to know how broken this system is, let me tell you about what happened to Obsidian with Fallout New Vegas in 2010. They made one of the best RPGs ever created. They shipped 5 million copies. They generated $300 million in revenue. Bethesda was over the moon. But Obsidian's contract had a bonus clause tied to Metacritic scores. They needed an 85 to get paid. They got an 84. 1 point difference. One single point away from a bonus that was apparently worth millions. So despite creating a masterpiece that made Bethesda hundreds of millions of dollars, Obsidian got nothing extra. The missed bonus directly contributed to their layoffs in 2012, and Chris Avallone said that New Vegas was a straight payment, no royalties, only a bonus if we got an 85 plus score, which we didn't. And that's the system. Make a brilliant game, generate hundreds of millions, but miss an arbitrary number by 1 point and watch your team get laid off. They don't care about you. But that was 2010. Let me explain what's happened since. So private equity have tripled their share of gaming acquisitions since 2018. They've dumped $21 billion into the industry, infecting every studio we love. And if you wonder why your favorite games keep getting worse, this is why. And how they operate is with earn-out bonuses. So instead of paying the full price up front, buyers promise massive bonuses if studios hit impossible targets in 2 to 3 years. It sounds generous, it's not. RPGs alone, for example, take 3 to 7 years on average to develop properly, with the right level of depth and quality, but investors expect results in 2 to 3 years. You see the problem there, right? Investors don't care about making good games, they care about making predictable returns. They're not buying studios, they're buying lottery tickets. So when those impossible standards collide with creative reality, guess what gets fed into the shredder? Arkane Studios made Dishonored and Prey, brilliant immersive sims. Then Bethesda decided to get involved. First, they forced Arkane to call their 2017 game Prey, despite it having nothing to do with the original Prey. The studio founder Rafael Colantonio said nobody at Arkane wanted to use that title and called it insulting to his team's artistry. He was forced to lie in interviews claiming he supported it. He called it a kick in the face and quit months later, saying, "I'm not in control of my own boat at this point." And we all know what happened with Arkane Austin, the disaster that was Redfall. A legendary studio destroyed because investors wanted to chase trends instead of supporting what actually made them great. And Microsoft did the same thing to Lionhead. They bought them in 2006 after Fable's success, then immediately started forcing them to chase whatever trend was hot. First, Connect. You remember that? They made Lionhead develop Fable: The Journey, a motion-controlled spin-off that deviated significantly from the original Fable games. And surprising nobody, it flopped. Then free-to-play live service Fable Legends, a multiplayer game that spent years in development, and just before launch, Microsoft cancelled it and closed Lionhead entirely. The beloved Fable series sat doing nothing for years, and even Microsoft later admitted that one of their biggest missteps was Lionhead. They should have learned from this. Of course they didn't. BioWare is the perfect example because we've watched it happen in slow motion. EA bought them for $860 million in 2007. $155 million of that was tied to performance metrics. Instant pressure. Mass Effect Andromeda was in development for 5 years, but developers say the bulk of the game was developed in just a year and a half. 5 years of corporate politics, then panicked development when the earn-out deadline loomed. EA forced them into live service because that's what investors wanted, not what BioWare was good at. The studio that gave us Baldur's Gate and Dragon Age Origins shipped games with terrible review scores, and dozens, if not all of the core team, writers, developers, they left. Mission accomplished, I suppose, right? Sadly, RPGs in particular fall victim to this because everything that makes them good conflicts with investor timelines. Complex narratives, branching storylines, comprehensive world building, all of this takes time and creative iteration. Larian Sven Vinker said it perfectly. Why are we spending $1 million on a dragon which nobody is ever going to see except like 5 people who made that obscure choice? Because if they see it, they have to be happy too. And that philosophy there, that every player's experience matters, is exactly what investors can't understand. They want predictable metrics, not $1 million dragons for 5 players. When you force these studios into quick turnarounds, guess what suffers? Everything that made you love them in the first place. But here's the thing though, studios that avoid this system are still making brilliant games. It's still possible. Larian stayed independent for 19 years, 6 years of development without financial pressure on Baldur's Gate 3, over 200 Game of the Year awards, massive commercial success. CD Projekt made The Witcher 3 with complete creative control. 93 Metacritic score, 6 million copies sold in 6 weeks, but when investor pressure hit for Cyberpunk 2077, we saw the results. Rushed development, broken launch, damaged reputation. The pattern's clear. Creative freedom produces exceptional games. Financial pressure produces disasters. The human cost is the worst. A BioWare developer said, "I actually cannot count the amount of stress casualties we had on Mass Effect Andromeda or Anthem." CD Projekt forced mandatory 6-day weeks despite promises of optional crunch. Some teams crunched for over a year. One developer said, "I've sat through so many crunches to the point I didn't even feel like I was alive anymore." This is literal intentional destruction of people who just want to make good games, and it's sad. So what's the solution? Well, first, stop pretending this is just business. It's systematic destruction with a business model attached to it. Support independent studios, buy their games, back their campaigns, show that creative freedom produces commercial success. Stop buying broken games from clearly compromised studios. Every purchase of a rushed, broken game funds this system. And call it out. When a studio gets acquired and immediately starts making worse games, that's not coincidence. That's the system working as designed. The survey data is clear, the developer consensus is overwhelming, the solution is in our hands. 64% of developers are telling us the problem is investors. Maybe it's time we listened. As always, thank you so much for watching, appreciate you. Please make sure to like, comment and subscribe. Everything really does help the channel out so much. And if you want to help support future videos, please consider signing up as a member to the channel. It all helps. Much love, thank you so much, I'll see you in the next one.